I'm Moshahida Sultana. I'm teaching economics at Dhaka University. I came here in San Francisco this week, and I'm here to talk about Bangladesh and its historical development and some of the areas where the labor issues are relevant. So Bangladesh actually got independent in 1971 from Pakistan. It was known as East Pakistan before it got independent because Pakistan had two parts, West Pakistan and East Pakistan. After Bangladesh got independent, it was mostly dealing with the post-reconstruction of the war, and then it was during that period during the post-reconstruction period, World Bank started to, have an interest in Bangladesh, and the Bangladesh also was dependent on the U.S. for food aid in the beginning, but later Bangladesh wanted to develop its economy in such a way. I'm talking about 1973-74. That was the time. Sheikh Mujib, who was the father of the nation, he wanted to nationalize all the industries. So at that time, actually, they were trying to, after nationalizing the industries, all the industries, jute sectors was one of the sector that was actually very important sector for Bangladesh, because jute is called the golden fiber of Bangladesh, and it is it was at that time the main source of foreign exchange. At that time, we used to export huge amount of jute in the whole world, and that was a lot of people were employed, and at that time, what happened is even though Sheikh Mujib thought that this nationalizing those industries would actually improve the situation, but actually the rampant corruption and the intransparency and the politicization of the trade unions actually resulted in much less efficient and corrupted jute industries. So what happened is, in the meantime, in 1980s, when that in the whole world, when the Thatcher and Reagan policies, they were trying to privatize all the basic industries, state-owned enterprises and utilities sector. So at that time, the same wind also came to Bangladesh, and that was the time that the World Bank was suggesting Bangladesh to privatize this the loss-making industries. So jute industries had to be subsidized, highly subsidized, because of the losses it was making, and that losses was because of the politicization of the trade unions. And they thought that it was the only solution, but they did not think that it was with better policies, with better management, these jute industries could be developed. Instead, they actually sold the national industries to the private industries, to the private sectors, and the private owners actually did not, make it a success.
They were giving money.
They were giving money, and they were actually, this is again a ground for them, a place where they could actually extract their own resources. Because jute industries, it was like a huge amount of wealth they had, but they were sold off, and the businesses were making losses again. So the privatization was not a solution, clearly. But on the other hand, what happened is the workers were displaced, and they lost their jobs. There were a huge amount of jute industry workers who lost jobs at that period in 1980s and 1990s during that time. And during that time, mostly the economists came up with the idea, or they wanted to popularize this idea that we have to make a structural shift, meaning that if we develop the garment sectors, the people who lost jobs in the jute sectors could be employed in the garment industries. But that actually did not happen, because all the people who were employed in jute industries have been working there for a long time, they did not have the skills to get employed in the garments industries. So this was a disaster. So there were a lot of workers who actually had to relocate, had to migrate to urban areas, were living in very bad condition. Some women, their children became prostitute. There were lots of social consequences at that time, which are not studied, or which are not made visible to the people in the media, through the media. So there are some works, but we know that they have been protesting for a long time for right wage, and also for getting a better job, but they actually lost it. So now this garment, the Ameli garment in its era, is trying to improve the situation by revitalizing this sector, this jute industry, but they have not been very successful so far yet. The reason is, the world has changed so much since 1970s, 80s, and 90s, because there is not enough demand for jute. And even though if there are demands, you have to compete in the international market with all the innovative products to be sold to the international market. So and the jute price also falls in the international markets, for which even the workers who are producing jutes, they are not getting good price. So in a way they are discouraged to produce jute, and for the jute industries, they are also facing losses again, but they are still struggling with government support. So now when we are talking about these jute industries, we need to also talk about how these garments industries actually grew. So now the development that we see in the garments industries, one might just think that it happened in an organized way. The reason that we see these days that the Rana Plaza collapse, or the Tazreen, the fire in Tazreen garments, so all of these are just they happen in a very unplanned way. It was not the government who planned that we should develop these garment sectors in such way, so that the workers get their right share, and the buildings have the right safe fire safety and all the other requirements. They did not comply in the beginning. They mushroomed during 1980s and 1990s in such a way, in a very unplanned way. So wherever there were like new opportunities, all the factories started its operation, just hiring a building somewhere in the city. So they did not even plan it in a way that this should be a space in an urban location where the factories would grow. If you go to Bangladesh, you will see that in the Dhaka city, in a very commercial area, there are like factories there. So you won't see the same thing in other parts of the world. So it is first of all, it is expensive to have those factories there. And what is happening is, because these buildings are very old, they are actually trying to cut their cost by hiring those kind of buildings. These are the consequences that the consequences that we see today is a result of this unplanned growth of these factories. So the government actually did not play any good role in the beginning when these factories actually grew, and the factory owners, they are actually were taking the advantage that the government did not have any plan. So later, when all these things started to happen after Tazreen fire and all the other incidences, the accidents that happened, the government, sometimes we talked about it. We talked a lot actually about how to plan these factories and how to have them relocate in some suburb areas where the workers could have better accommodation facilities, better access to transportation, etc. But this actually did not happen. So Now what is happening is, after this Rana Plaza collapse, the whole thing started, again came to the discussion. But the way the recent situation is developing, I mean, after Rana Plaza collapse, there are, that Accord and Alliance are trying to, figure out how they can inspect those industries and bring a reform in those factories. So they are trying their best. So far there have been like 20 factories identified, and that was closed down, and there are like 20,000 workers who already lost jobs so far. So I cannot give you the exact number, but this is the figure we see in the media. But the number could be much higher or lower. So I just don't want to quote something. But this is an approximate number that we know from the media. So what is happening right now is, again, you might want to ask that why, if after this Accord Alliance's steps to change the situation of the factories, how it is actually changing, or whether it is actually making any contribution to developing this, or developing these factories to meet the the fire safety criteria, etc., or the building code criteria. So these are some of the issues that we still didn't solve. But one thing I want to say, that at the same time, that another thing happened, and that is the United States has already suspended the GSP facility, Generalized System of Preference facilities, and they think that this will play as a catalyst role to make the factory workers improve the situations of the buildings and improve the worker safety situation. So but we don't think that it is going to work, because this GSP was never facilities was never applicable for the garment industry, because these facilities are enjoyed by ceramic industries, plastic industries, toys industries. So eventually you are making other industries suffer to symbolically show that you are suspending facilities of Bangladeshi population, facilities given to Bangladesh. So this is, I think, I would say that this is kind of a hypocrisy, kind of it's cheating with the people, confusing the people. This should not be the way you should deal with this problem. The other thing I want to mention is the way this Accord and Alliance is working in Bangladesh. What is Accord and Alliance? Should I describe more?
Why don't you talk about
yeah. So Accord is it was developed with the Accord is an agreement. I mean, a legally binding agreement that was made by. There were lots of stakeholders in it. For example, starting from it's ILO, it involves the buyers. There are actually two. The alliance is by United States and Accord is by European Union. About 60% of our garments products goes to European Union, and about 25% of our garment products goes to the United States. So these are the main buyers located in the US and EU. They actually came to an agreement that they would, inspect the factories and would do something that to change this, the factory situation. So this is, some people think that this is the only way to, solve this problem. So there are people who are expecting to solve the problem by, using this Accord and Alliance to get involved in this whole process and play a role. But I think this will partially solve these problems, of course, but I don't think that will be the ultimate solution, because unless you actually improve the trade union situation, I'm going to point out 2 or 3 things that why accord and alliance should not be seen as the only solution to this problem. I think the first thing that you should consider is the United States or the buyers are not doing anything about the minimum wage situation. So whatever they do, it is not improving the situation of the workers.
And what is the average wage in Bangladesh?
Oh, okay, now the minimum wage is 5,300. After this Rana Plaza collapse, very recently, there had been through the tripartite consultation, we have this minimum wage set in 5,300, which actually the demand of the workers was 8,000
and
taka.
How much is 5,300?
Okay, 8,000 taka is about $100, and 5,300 is much less than $100, as you can see. So this means that there are lots of the negotiation actually did not work, and it did not went in favor of the workers.
So definitely. It's not a living wage, really.
No, it is not even a living wage. Now let me tell you something. I actually was asked to help an organization called BILS, Bangladesh Institute of Labor Studies, to develop, this living wage, measure the living wage. So we had all the statistical data, and it shows that labor is supposed to earn at least minimum 18,000 to survive. I mean, if we consider the amount of, amount of money they spend for transportation, health, children's education, everything, the calorie intake and everything. So the 18,000 was the number that came up. But what happened is these workers, through the trade unions, they came to the negotiation table with 8,000 taka, but still they could not manage to have it increased to 8,000. So finally what happened, the negotiation ended up with 5,300 taka, which is much lower than 8,000 demand. Anyway, after this is one thing, that this minimum wage, and you know that there was a study done recently in 2011 by a consulting firm, which shows that if a t-shirt price is $14, then a worker gets only 12 cents from this. The share of this t-shirt is only 12 cents for the worker. So where does the rest of the money go? So we can ask this kind of question. Now, when we ask this kind of question, we have to also make sure that the buyers in the US or EU, they should be concerned, they should genuinely have an interest to solve the problem. If you cannot just do something because somebody is telling you that you are held responsible, you have to feel where the problem is. You have to understand in what situation the workers are living in Bangladesh. You have to feel the difficulties, the hardship that they're going through. So these are the kind of things, if they have genuine interest to solve the problems, I guess they can. Because you have to look at the supply chain and try to find out that how much money that the other like the agents and the supplies in the whole supply chain, who is earning what. So this has to be discussed. This problem has to be solved by the buyer's side.
Now, the women who were killed, many of the women who were killed in the collapse of the factory, were told that they were ordered to go back in the plants, or in the factory. And the situation of unions in Bangladesh is very difficult. Workers are kidnapped. There's a situation of repression for organizers, for garment worker organizers. What is the situation for the labor movement and garment workers union movement in Bangladesh?
Well, the garment workers movement, even yesterday there was a protest taking place in front of Rana Plaza. The injured people were demanding compensation, because they all did not get the compensation required. And the way this compensation is measured, this is also controversial, because the government sometimes give them a lump sum amount without holding responsible the business people. So there is a lot of things going on, but the movements are not going that far because the trade unions are not at all strong in Bangladesh. And I don't think it is the United States which can go and tell Bangladesh that you have to meet this, you have to make this trade union stronger, because who is going to strengthen trade unions if you do not give them proper time to organize themselves? I have been talking to some leaders there in Bangladesh, and I have heard many times that they are having difficulties forming trade unions because they are working overtime, because the wage is too low, and sometimes they have to give the order or finish their work in a due time. They are working overtime. They do not have time to organize themselves. This is one problem that exists in all industries. So if you have to make the trade union stronger, there are lots of other things that has to be worked out. They do not have a place to organize themselves. And I also think there are some NGOs who are working in this field to improve the condition of the workers. But actually NGOs are not the solution, because NGOs come with the money, and when they don't have money, there is no activities. It is the trade unions only which can solve these problems, but who is going to strengthen these trade unions or make them active is not discussed anywhere. Or even though they are discussed, the trade unions just die. I mean, if sometimes you see that if there is a possibility, I mean, after 5 or 6 months, if you go there, you will see that they are not working anymore. So definitely the buyers cannot ensure that the trade unions are active, even though they are in the compliance. They have this as a condition that these workers will have to have trade unions, but the trade unions are not developing, and that is because of the politicization, is the repression that they're doing. Because of that, the trade unions are not becoming active.
Now, I understand a lot of the owners of these factories of the garment industry are actually in the parliament, and they affect the legislation. So they have a vested interest in not having legislation that protects or union organizing or union rights.
Yeah, and it's in every institution. Even in Dhaka University, there are some professors who also have their garment industries. It is the most intelligent people who are supposed to be known as intelligent people, who are supposed to be the most progressive people. They also own garments industries. So how can you expect them to come up with this kind of legislation that could be applied, or the compliance is?
Now, what is the role of the World Bank and the IMF in Bangladesh?
Well, that is a question. I mean, this is everywhere. It's the same situation. The neoliberal policies are how they are affecting the workers, especially if you look at the utilities. For example, the public services. In the public services, there are trade unions, but because they are over politicized, and it's not working. And there are especially in the power and energy sector, you'll see that all the organizations, the distribution, production, distribution, and transmission, these are all separated. So this means that the unions could be stronger when they were under one umbrella, but when the moment you actually divide those institutions and have them as separate entity and function in different areas, and they are even physical location is has been changed, these unions do not work better. So I think this is a very planned way of destroying the activities of the trade unions, and there is a privatization is taking place in the power and energy sector. Like in every areas you will see that the private companies are working there. We have quick rentals, the rental power plants, and the private independent power producers who are selling their electricity at a very high price. So electricity price is also increasing. At the same time, trade unions are becoming weak, and it's in the power and energy sector. In the water sector, it's the same thing happening. So everywhere, I would say that with the suggestion of World Bank and IMF, all these sectors are suffering, and workers everywhere, and the amount of contract labor, this has also increased. The outsourcing is one way of reducing cost, and the workers do not have safe work condition. They do not have any kind of security, no job security. So the contractual worker, they are the most sufferers.
So what percentage of workers in Bangladesh are contract workers or temporary workers, casual workers?
Well, it will be difficult for me to say, because I know for some sectors there are some contract laborers there in power and energy sector, in WASA also. In most of the sectors that has to be studied actually. I cannot give you that information.
Now the unions are under tremendous repression. You're saying the economic policies.
Mm-hmm.
The IMF deregulation, privatization have led to further worsening of their conditions of the workers. Politically, is there a labor party? Is there a political movement of workers in Bangladesh that have a program, economic and social program, to defend working people in Bangladesh?
Yes, of course. We have many left parties, political parties, who are always by the side of the workers, who have been protesting, and they have been playing a very big role. They are always standing by the workers. So this is still, even though the number of people doing this kind of movements are with the workers are very small in number, but they are very powerful, and they are very genuinely committed to improving the workers' situation. Even though I would say that they actually failed during the negotiation, when the minimum wage negotiation took place, our political parties could not actually play a very good role.
Now, Wal-Mart Corporation, the Gap Corporation, they say that they have no responsibility, or that their factories are safe, and Wal-Mart claimed that they had inspected their factories and where their products are produced, and they were safe. What is the real situation with U.S. companies like Wal-Mart and the Gap Corporation in Bangladesh?
Well, what I would want to say that this is what is interesting here, that there are lots of subcontracting going on here. You are outsourcing your job. So the factories with whom Wal-Mart or Gap is working, they are subcontracting some of their works to a very third grade, fourth grade factories, where the minimum wage is not only the minimum wage is low, there's a huge amount of repression. They are working in a very unhealthy situation. They are working overtime. So these kind of exploitations are taking place mostly in the third grade, fourth grade industry factories. So even though they claim that this is happening, but if you look at all the other factories with whom they are subcontracting, this is the situation.
And the situation with child labor, with wages so low for the people of Bangladesh, the garment workers, does that lead to children and families being involved in the production of garments? I mean, if you subcontract to a family, a mother and her child, that the whole family is working on these garments for these corporations. Is that the case in Bangladesh?
Well, I haven't heard of many cases like that, but what I know that this subcontracting are actually taking place with the factories. It's not the whole family. I haven't heard of any such cases.
So it's mainly just adult workers.
Yeah, adult workers.
Who have been subcontracted on the work.
Yeah.
So is the work taking place in the factory, or it takes place in the home, or where does the work take place when they subcontract?
They subcontract. I mean, they are factories, but very low grade, and you will see that the working condition is not very well there. They are paid very low wage. So
what is the working conditions? Like what kind of working conditions?
Well, for example, they do not meet the compliance of the of a factory. For example, the building code, the fire safety situation, these are mainly these problems are visible in those industries, not the better ones where who are the big factories are not may not have these problems very much, and they are also sometimes well paid. I mean I wouldn't say very well paid, but they actually pay the minimum wage. But the one problem that is very common in many industries, in factories there in Bangladesh, is there are a lot of situation we have heard through media that they are not paying the minimum wage yet. Even though the minimum wage has been approved and they are bound to give that wage, but they are not giving the.
So they ignore the minimum wage.
They ignore this minimum wage. The workers do not have the identity, and they're still being exploited. And there are reports we have heard that they are not implementing this minimum wage yet.
So the enforcement by the government, that's the state of enforcement of the labor code in Bangladesh?
Well, this has not changed much. And there are some structural issues too. Like if you have a go down in the downstairs, and if you have a generator just next to the go down, then there is a high possibility that it will catch fire. So these problems are not yet solved. Even though some of the 20 factories have been stopped, but there are so many other issues that have to be solved.
Now, the destruction of the jute industry in Bangladesh, it benefited the companies like Monsanto and DuPont, synthetic fibers. What is the state of rural workers, agricultural workers, and in Bangladesh, and what is the role of Monsanto and other companies that are developing genetically engineered products in Bangladesh and around the world?
Yeah. So in Bangladesh, Monsanto is trying to sell the hybrid seeds. For example, recently we have golden rice worldwide. You have heard that they are trying to push hard to sell this kind of seeds to the developing countries with the excuse that it has high level of food, nutrition content, which will good for the children. So this is one way, but we know that in our country people are not very much conscious about it. But it is only the people who are informed about this kind of harmful effect of hybrid seeds. They are aware of it and they are protesting against it. But we know very well that this is not going to work in Bangladesh, and one reason is because people I'm not sure people will be ready to have this golden rice because of the taste or something. And very recently, BT brinjal is another thing. They're trying to sell BT brinjal, and the government has approved actually the government distributed the seeds to the farmers for free. There was an occasion, it happened in this year, 2 or 3 months ago, and the BT brinjal now shows that it is again they are being affected by insects. So they were supposed to be immune of this kind of infections, but it is happening. So this means that this is going to be another failed case. And there are lots of other things going on at the same time in Bangladesh, as I told you before, in 2010-11. So there was a hybrid seed called Jhalok seed, which was sold to the poor farmers in Bangladesh, and there were like 10,000 farmers lost their crops. And after that, the Agro G, who sold those seed. It was a Chinese company who sold those seed. They wanted to, after long protest, they wanted to give compensation, but the farmers refused to take the compensation because it was in the form of seed and fertilizers. It was, and most of the people, the media would hear that the companies compensated the farmers, which was made very widely, which was widely publicized, but actually they refused to take the compensation.
What relationship does the Bangladesh working class have with Indian workers who are also facing the same effects of privatization and deregulation?
I don't think there is much, in terms of the relationship, in Bangladesh, the workers are not that organized to have a international solidarity with India, because recently we have been hearing another confusing story that by this time that these 20 factories were closed down and lots of workers are being fired, we are hearing that India is taking our position. After China, it is India taking the position. So it is the competition, and workers are not really very much aware of the relationship with India.
And there's been a rise of fundamentalism in around the world. And how has that affected Bangladesh?
Rise of fundamentalism. Well, this is a political question, and I think rise of fundamentalism, you see, is everywhere, but the way you look at fundamentalism, it is also a very critical issue at this time, because in Bangladesh, we had a movement last year, it is called Shahbag movement, where there were we had the war criminals were getting by without being getting any punishment. So all the young people, they came to the street to protest. There were hundreds of thousands of protesters gathered in one place to show how they are against letting them get rid of this trial. So what happened is, after that, the situation turned in a direction where there was a division between the fundamentalists, who were known as they related this way in Bangladesh, that the Rajakars are the fundamentalists, but I do not think in that way, because the fundamentalists and the Rajakars, they are separate terms, because you might have an belief, Islamic belief, which someone can can confused and say that this person is fundamentalist. But how do you identify the difference between Rajakar and fundamentalist? This is one question. And the next thing is, I do not think the fundamentalists are getting stronger in Bangladesh. Okay, so this is always a terror that is shown to you. It's something. It's an imagination.
It's a stereotype.
Yeah, it's a stereotype.
Well, do you think that the rise of fundamentalism is in part because of the economic crisis? That young people are looking for some solution.
Yeah, they have a vacuum of ideology, and this is one thing, and the poor economic condition is another reason. And this is why they are being attracted to this kind of Islamist politics, So, but I do not blame these people. I do not want to call them or identify them as fundamentalists, because I think this is a terrorism or fundamentalism. These are strong words to define these people.
Well, in the United States, there's a growth of fundamentalism too. Christian fundamentalism and Christianity and theocratic ideas that we need a theocratic state in the United States. Now, what is the? You want me to hold?
Yeah, I'm getting tired.
Okay. What is the role of social media and communication, community media, and the internet in Bangladesh, and how is it being used by people and young people to communicate and get issues out?
So social media is playing a good role and also a bad role, because as you can remember last year, when the fact that you are talking about the rise of fundamentalism, the division between, first of all, we should not think about rise of fundamentalism. All people should be treated equally. Someone might have strong belief in some Islam, some may have lesser belief, or some could be atheist. Now the moment I marginalize this fundamentalist by saying that they are the extremist people, at the same time I'm also talking about the atheists who might be marginalized by the fundamentalists. So I do not see any society, I do not personally visualize any society where there are these strong divisions. But one thing that is important is this: in last year we have found out the effect of social media, because last year the whole in this movement social media played a very important role, and but it also played a very bad role, because there were some atheist bloggers who were arrested by the government to show that they want to suppress the atheists and want to favor the fundamentalists. So to make a balance like this, they did that, but which we did not support, because the bloggers of all kinds should have the freedom to express themselves. Either it is the fundamentalist or the atheist, I don't have any problem. Everybody should have the freedom of expression. And the blog sites, the Facebooks were hacked, and all these things happened in Bangladesh. But this should not happen, and this surveillance, the level of surveillance has also increased, and the youth are somehow now scared of posting any kind of post that goes against the government. So this is because of the recent surveillance activities done by the government.
And how is communication, internet, and social media to get their stories out?
For social media, there are a lot of people who uses social media these days, and you will see that the mobile phone is one way the workers and all kinds of people can share pictures. And these days, whenever you take a picture of something, it is easily spreaded to all the people. But so far I didn't see much impact of social media on the workers' movement. But it is with the use of mobile phone, it has been made easier to organize people. So that is the kind of development that took place, but I'm not sure that the social media is still playing a very important role in organizing the workers.
And what has been the role of U.S. unions in Bangladesh? Has there been any role of American workers supporting the workers of Bangladesh?
Of course, the solidarity between workers between two countries is important, but that has to be looked upon in such a way that the relationship, they should share the same agenda. Now, in a country where trade union is not strong and the leaders are not very much aware of what is happening, there is a possibility that even if you have good intentions, even if the US trade unions they go to Bangladesh with good intentions, but they may end up with having a situation where they end up imposing this kind of restriction like suspension of GSP, because I think it was this ILO
or
CFL,
AFL-CIO.
AFL-CIO. Yeah, it is the AFL-CIO's advocacy for which the US Congress has pushed this idea of suspending this GSP, which actually has no impact on improving the situation of the workers. So this is, I think, this kind of link should not be made, because this is not how you penalize the garment industries, but this is another way of politicizing this whole issue, and that has to be stopped. And you have to be very careful before you have a relationship with other countries' trade unions. You have to be very careful about whom you are working, for whom you are actually doing your activism. So this is very important. So you need to have a broader understanding of the whole economic situation of Bangladesh before you develop these relationships. I know that there are like $1 movement. People wanted to say that if you increase the price of the T-shirt by $1, that will go to the workers, as if it will go to the workers, but actually it will not. It is in the middle of this supply chain. Somebody will absorb this $1. So without knowing everything in detail, when you come up with this kind of idea, even though if you have good intentions, this might not actually benefit the workers. So you have to be very careful and understand the whole supply chain.
Now these disasters and the deaths of thousands of workers in Bangladesh have shaken the world.
Yeah.
That this kind of situation would happen. Yet in the United States there was a Triangle Fire. There have also been industrial disasters, and workers are getting injured in the United States. So this is not unique. It's part of the history of the people of the world. Do you see any possibility of workers worldwide linking up together around the issue of health and safety and protection for workers?
Definitely, I would want that. Definitely, I would want it, but that has to be a genuine interest. If there is a trade union or a labor organization working with the labor organization, that's fine. But a labor organization having a powerful linkage with all the powerful multinational companies, getting their money and doing their activities, I do not support that kind of activism or that kind of intention to do good for the workers.
So in other words, you don't think that these companies, big multinational companies, really are going to be the way that we change the situation of the workers in Bangladesh?
Well, I mean, this is now, you might think that this is the only way right now, because these companies are responsible here. But what I wanted to mean is that any kind of solidarity among all the trade union workers around the world, that should not be supported by any company's interest, because that has to be a linkage that will originate from the genuine interest to improve the workers' situation. It should not be sponsored by any kind of companies or any kind of single donors. To do this kind of activities, you need support from organizations sometimes. But should I take this support from this organization? Then what does it mean? I'm actually working with the people who are actually responsible for the destruction of my people. So I don't think that this should happen. So workers should definitely unite, but not on the basis of their own interest, not on the basis of how the sponsorship would come. So that is why I'm against the NGOs supporting the workers' movement. I'm against any kind of activism that is supported by the multinational companies.